And so we have with us today two guests who have very generously given of their schedule. And I know you're both very busy people right now, so we are extra grateful that you're here with us today. So Emily, I'll have you introduce yourself first, please.
Hi, I'm Emily Martinez. I'm a lead engineer at Pipeworks. In the advertisement for this, it said I was an engineer, but I just got promoted last week. So now I am a lead engineer at Pipeworks, and I make video games for a living.
Living the dream. Thank you, Emily. And Sara, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Sara Smestad. I work with Emily at Pipeworks. I'm the lead animator. I've been in the games business for over 10 years now. I'm originally from Yokohama, Japan. And yeah, ended up in Oregon to start my career.
Awesome. Thank you both. And so that our listeners know and our attendees, we're going to go through a few questions, me and Abby, and then we will take questions from you folks. So if you have them, hold on to them. If you're worried you're going to forget them, text them to me or Abby, and we'll help you remember at the end. So Abby, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. The first question that we have for you, Emily and Sara, is, one, you kind of touched on this already, but what is your job title and how would you describe the work that you do for Pipeworks?
Ooh.
Do you want to go ahead,
Yeah,
Sara?
Emily, do you want to start us off?
Oh, I can go ahead. Yes.
Yeah.
So as an engineer, so there's different departments at Pipeworks. I guess I'll just talk about the departments at Pipeworks so I can put my work into context. At Pipeworks, there are producers who sort of organize everything. There are artists who do the art. There are engineers who do the programming, and there is QA who tests the game. As an engineer, I'm primarily concerned with coding and the overall architectural structure of the game. So and then we have designers who design the game. So we take the designs from the designers, they have wikis, and then we transform them into real computer programs. And that's what I do, is I make real computer programs out of wikis.
Very cool. And how about you, Sara?
So I guess on the art end, we are the ones who just apply like the visual stuff to the architecture that the programmers make. I'm the animator, so I'm specifically a character animator. That is my day-to-day. So I'm the one who makes the characters move and do things. Every once in a while I do other things as well, making monsters and props and things move, but most of the time it's making the people move. As the lead animator, my work is split between actually doing the animations and also managing my team. So that could be anything from assigning tasks, organizing what everyone's day-to-day looks like, giving feedback, and just generally being a morale booster.
So there's a little more to it than just making the games. It's a part of a big project. You're part of a big team.
It's a lot of people stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And what led you folks to where you are now? Like where did you guys go to school? Where did you grow up? That kind of stuff. Like what led you into video games as a career? I guess, Emily, I'll direct that to you first.
So I grew up in San Diego, California. I was always interested in video games, but I was worried that a career in video games wasn't really possible. I'd heard it was very hard to get into the industry, but I really did enjoy video games, and that sort of led me to enjoying computers and computer science. So I got a degree in computer science at San Diego State, and then I wanted to continue my education. So I went to San Luis Obispo and got another degree in computer science. And then I wanted to continue my education, so I came up to Oregon and tried to get a PhD in computer science. And that did not go well. It turns out that getting a PhD is a very hard thing to do, and it requires you to really love what you're doing. And as far as what I was doing, I wasn't really in love with it. I was in bioinformatics, and it was super cool, but super cool doesn't equal a lot of like internal desire to do something. So when I dropped out of my PhD program, I decided, hey, why not apply to Pipeworks? Why not apply to a video game company? I mean, I heard that they're hard to get into, and I heard that it's a hard field, but you know, when you don't have a job, you just apply places, right? So I was very happy to be able to get into video games so long after enjoying them, and also sort of writing off the idea of being able to have a video game career.
That's very cool. I think we got a chance to meet you folks a little bit earlier, and it is really nice to hear about, that it's not always a straight line where you end up. It's a little bit of adventuring on the way. How about you, Sara? Where'd you grow up? What led you to video games? Was it something you knew you were going to do?
So video games was not something I knew I was going to do. I always knew that I was going to end up as an artist, whether it was an illustrator, character designer, or graphic designer. I always liked drawing, and that's what I wanted to do. I grew up in Yokohama, Japan. My dad is American, so I grew up speaking both Japanese and English. And I knew generally that, once I graduated school, I was going to go to college in the States. So I picked kind of at random an art school in Savannah, Georgia. And it was it was actually the summer after I graduated high school, before I left for college, that I decided I was going to get into animation because I had always liked playing video games. I was playing Kingdom Hearts, and the ending cutscene was just so beautiful. I think it was the first one, maybe it was the second one. One of them, the cutscene was just so beautiful. I'm like, you know what? This is what I want to do. Like, this is what I want to do with my life. I went to school, studied animation, and for a little while, I had hoped to get into film and television, like cartoon shows. But games was definitely at the time where the jobs were. In 2000, when I was in college, there was a big writer's strike affecting Hollywood. A lot of film and television jobs kind of disappeared for a little while and were put on hold, but games was completely unaffected. And so that's where a lot of people are hiring. So kind of just, for practical reasons, I ended up in games.
Well, thank you both so much. It's so cool to hear just slowly and like peel back the layers about like exactly how people get into what they do and then what they actually do in their job to create these amazing things. So kind of on that note, like you both live and work in these separate but related spheres of kind of, the overhead of video games for this company. So what are like the actual tools and software that you use? And, for people who are trying to get into this stuff, do you have anything you might recommend? We'll switch it around. We'll do Sara first.
All right. So as an animator, my program of choice is Autodesk Maya. That's where all my animation happens. It's a 3D program. That's what I use day to day for my illustrative work. I do like freelance comic works on the side. And for that, it's entirely Photoshop. So Maya and Photoshop are the two programs that I use, primarily. They are both very, very expensive programs to, Maya especially, to own. I think they're both subscription-based now, so they take a lot of your money. So to start, I would not actually recommend those programs. We have a lot of artists at Pipeworks who use Blender, which is completely free. A lot of professionals use it. A lot of students like using it to learn 3D. So I recommend that very strongly. And as far as Photoshop goes, I don't have a lot of experience with the alternatives, but I know that there are a whole slew of much cheaper, much more robust programs for illustration now. Procreate is a great one. Clip Studio Paint is another one. So I use Maya and Photoshop, but there are a lot of really good, really like professional level programs that are much more affordable, that are perfect for getting into if you have an interest in digital art programs.
That's awesome. We love accessibility, 100%.
I'm not sponsored by any of these people. I am just all for not paying a lot of money for art programs.
Yeah, 100%. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, so on the programming side, we use a variety of different languages. Often often there'll be a third party, the client, who tells us, hey, we want to make a video game about XYZ, and they'll hire Pipeworks to make the video game. And they'll be like, and you have to use these technologies. So we actually are pretty flexible with what technologies we use. And my manager, Dan, he's always talking about, like, it doesn't really matter what programming languages you know, because if you're a good programmer, you can learn any programming language. Like you can be adaptable. So we don't hire specifically usually that are like, oh, you have to know this language. So languages I've used in the past, I really like C#. That's part of the .NET ecosystem. C++ is what I'm working in right now. I'm not a very technical person, which is funny because like I'm the lead engineer, but I'm like not very hardcore at all. So I'm like C++, it's kind of hard. Java, we've used Java before for some of our backend stuff. But yeah, it doesn't really matter what you learn on. So you could definitely learn on C, you could learn Python, you could learn Java, and all of these like programming like languages are really easy to just like download like an IDE for. Like you could go, that's a development environment. You can just go to like the .NET website and download Visual Studio, and there's a Visual Studio Community Edition, and that's totally free. I mean, that's what I use personally, like on my own time. As far as video game engines, we've used Unity before, we've used Unreal. Sometimes we work on engines that are just written completely in C++ and there's no like engine there, it's all custom code. So it's really just about being adaptable. And then as far as getting my day-to-day done, I spend most of my day on Google and Slack.
I mean, yeah.
Same.
I think having switched to virtual programming and a lot of work from home stuff, we all feel the slack. We're connecting how we can. I realized that one of the things that seems like a little bit of a mystery from the outside is when a game is being made. That can be a really long process, but what does it look like when a game starts in, and when does it cross your desk in the process? I'm going to throw that out to both of you. I don't know who would like to answer that most.
I want to answer this because I love this. This is the best, because when I was hired, I got hired in the middle of a game. So I got to like see the game from the middle. But then I asked my manager and I was like, next time I want to see the beginning of a game, like ground up, right? So there's this process called pre-production. And that's where you just take like just a couple of people. It's kind of like cooks in the kitchen. You don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen. So you start out with a really small group of people, like maybe the lead engineer and maybe like another engineer to like help them, and like an artist and like the most important designer, and like the starting producer, and you guys just make a ton of documentation. You just plan everything out, and part of that is just to say how many additional people are going to have to be put onto the game, you know, because like at the beginning you're like, am I going to need 10 engineers? Am I going to need 20 engineers? Nobody knows, right? So you have to get like everybody to design stuff and plan first, and that's like a really creative, interesting, fun process that can go anywhere from like a month to like 6 months, depending on the game. And then after that, you start adding more people to it, and it becomes more people managing, because at the beginning it's very technical and very like planning. And then later it becomes more people, and you're just throwing people at it, especially like new hires. You're like, oh, this person, they've never done anything before. Bring them on mid-game, right? Because then you can kind of like train them up, as opposed to bringing them at the very beginning, right? And then there's a lot of process about, there's usually milestones. So there'll be like every month you'll plan on getting certain things done. You're going to be like, okay, we're going to get this tech done, or we'll be able to show this thing. Like the character will be able to walk around at the end of this month, or you'll be able to do this social experience at the end of this month. And so you do all these little segments kind of planning. There's a lot. Software development is actually really interesting. Like it's a whole field in of itself of just how you organize people to get stuff done, right? Because if you have a huge project, it's just like, how do you get everybody to contribute in a meaningful way and not block them up? And actually that's weirdly the thing that like made me want to be a lead, because as an engineer, it's kind of sad. I feel like programming is not the hardest thing I have to do. Because like programming is something you can do, like it's a solvable problem, you know, but like the problem of how you get people to work together in a meaningful way towards a good product without like going over time and without like going over budget is like really complicated, hard, and like dynamic, right?
Anyone who's tried to figure out where we're going for dinner with like 10 people on the group chat knows exactly what you're talking about. It's really hard to get everybody focused on the same goal and get an answer and stuff. Cool. Thank you, Emily. Sara, did you have stuff you wanted to add to that?
I guess in my experience, it really depends on the project. I've been a part of projects where it really started with the artists, where it was just kind of like coming up like, I've been a part of projects where I was just doodling some characters in between games, and that led to a design, which led to like the design team coming on, and then like a couple engineers to kind of like build something as a prototype after that. And that just kind of like after the fact ended up like got relabeled as pre-production before we went into production. So I've been a part of that. I've definitely been a part of projects where I came on a little bit later. So engineers were already involved and like the general structure of the game was already made, and it was my job to kind of just create art on top of that. As far as like where my work comes in though, because Pipeworks is it's changing. Our team is definitely getting a little bigger. So I think there's less of that going on now. But for a little while, the team was small enough where a lot of us wore like multiple hats. And because I'm also an illustrator, I have been a part of projects where I came on as a concept artist, character designer at the very, very beginning of the pre-production schedule. And then my work kind of stops for a little bit. People go off and take those character designs. People go off and start building like, you know, the very basic game. And then once that kind of gets established a little more, the work comes back, and now I'm back on as an animator. So I take the characters that I or somebody else designed and make them move and then plug them into the engine that was created, or like the game that was created in the in-between time. So yeah, my work kind of tends to be split in a couple segments.
Well, and so that's a pretty natural segue into kind of the next line of inquiry that we had for you all, because you both kind of touched on it in your answer there. But it sounds like people skills are a big part of how you were both able to navigate your job, like actually talking to people, helping them through problems. But in general, what are the kinds of skills that you need to be successful in your different areas that you have within the jobs that you do? I'm a big fan of switching it up, so we'll go Emily this time.
Okay. So yeah, I think people skills are great, but I want to say that you actually don't have to have you don't have to be like, I'm a people person, right? Because we have some engineers who are very like, they're focused on their own thing, and that sort of is a different engineering track. So we've got several different engineering tracks. One is for principals, which is like very specific engineers, and it's not like people skills are ever a bad thing. I'm just saying you don't have to be that person who always wants to talk to people. And the principal is like, I'm an engineer. But a really high level principal though is also a mentor for a lot of people. So like, even if you're not the most people person, like it definitely benefits you to be able to mentor people in that role. So that's very technical. And then my track is lead engineer, which is like more of like the organizing other engineers, getting stuff done like that. And then the last track is managerial track. So that's where you're actually managing other employees and sort of like mentoring them. I'm sorry, I totally forgot the question because I just went off on a
Oh,
tangent.
You're good. It was just like, what are some other skills or things on top of that you find value in knowing or would recommend people develop to like succeed?
Yeah, definitely. So people skills are good. I want to just say communication in general, like being in Zoom calls like this and talking in Zoom calls. Like I know that that's kind of weak sauce, but like the ability to do that is actually going to make you a better employee someday. Like we're never going to get totally away from work from home. So like just learning how to participate in things like this is like great, I think. And also like writing skills, just communication, right? Because like I'll have to write emails or I'll have to like in Slack, like Slack is an actual skill. Like you're like in Discord and you're like learning real skills, right? Because you have to tell people like how something's going to be able to done. Like I often joke, like I have to write essays. They're called technical design documents, but then when I write an essay, like I Google a bunch of stuff and I like look at different options, like how am I going to program this thing? Is it even possible to use this technology? Because often we use like third-party technologies, like we need to do voice chat, but we're not going to actually code voice chat. We're just going to buy voice chat from someone. So I have to go and like research, like how does Vonage, do they offer a service that we could use? And then I have to like type up like, well, we could use Vonage for our voice chat. Here's why, and here's why not, right? So like there's just a bunch of like really basic sort of skills, I would say, that are just like become really important. And then I mean, for engineering, definitely just strong programming, and that can be self-taught or it could be through school. Math is useful. It depends on like how hard, like levels of math sort of vary depending on what your specialization is. So I would say those are probably the most important skills.
Sarah?
Yeah, I guess on my end, because I am a lead animator, like people skills is pretty important. Just being able to, you know, I hold a lot of meetings. I have to be very proactive in, talking to my team, assigning them tasks, you know, not just communication stuff, but knowing if I have a team of 4 people, knowing what their individual strengths are, so I can divvy up my tasks in a way that would, you know, like lead to their best success and therefore the teams. Being able to like tailor tasks to people's strength is very important. Being able to communicate things that you need and things that you need changed is very important. Is one that probably took me the longest time. I have a very critical eye, so I'm very good at seeing things that need fixing. Communicating how I want those things fixed in a way that feels good to me and feels good to them is very important. That was the hardest part for me. Finding that mix between being encouraging, but also being honest and being very assertive about what you need is very important. That's probably the key part of people skills for me that I had to learn on the job.
I'm still working on that.
It's hard. And
it's the eternal struggle.
Yeah. And like how that looks too, something that I learned recently is how that looks can be very different per person. I was reading something recently about how women managers or female identified managers tend to ask or like email and communicate in a different way than their male counterparts. But how like it's not that there is a better and a worse way, it's that there are different ways, and that, if you include a lot of exclamation points in your emails, or if you use a lot of emotional language, it doesn't make you sound less competent. Sometimes that kind of communication leads to people feeling more encouraged, kind of thing. It takes some time to figure out how to get what you need from your team. But knowing that looks different depending on who the manager is, and that's not a bad thing, was a pretty key part for me.
We talk a lot at Ophelia Spice about how direct communication and assertive communication isn't the same thing as hostile communication. And that's something I know that a lot of women in the workplace and girls, we're not always allowed to have that assertiveness, and that. So I'm really glad to hear you both talk about that as something that comes into work life and things that you've thought about and sounds like wildly succeeded at. You both have very cool positions in your jobs. I did have another question, which is, so video games are part of your work life. Are they a part of your life outside work? What kind of stuff do you guys like to do? What gets really passionate and interested? Because we've been off about fandom earlier today. So what are your things that you love? Sarah, you start us out and then we'll go to Emily.
So video games in my personal life comes and goes. It just drawing in general, art in general comes and goes in my personal life now. I think in my 20s, I would draw all day for work, and then I would come home and I would draw all day, at home overnight. I think I've kind of chilled out on that a little bit. Work-life balance and just like art and life balance for me at the core is very important. I find myself the most motivated now when I can pick up and go do something else. So my big hobby is gardening. I'm all up on that. Doing something that is completely unrelated to drawing is my big thing. But games too. I'm not the kind of person that plays games all day, every day. I am usually several months behind the hottest game, if not like a year. So I'm just getting really into Hades right now. It is an awesome game. I love it. I'm super into it. I'm like a solid year behind everyone else. Everyone else discovered it ages ago. And I tend to like the really casual games. So like Animal Crossing was my thing, like Pokemon's my thing. Like I will just sit there and play forever, like log serious hours. But the kind of games that like don't require a serious time commitment on my end. It tends to be the one I'm into now.
I mean, same. I'm going to say my Blue Rose Garden and Animal Crossing is one of my proudest achievements in life. So I feel you. Oh, that's beautiful. What about you, Emily? What's some of the stuff that you're passionate about outside of work?
Yeah, I am really passionate about games. I guess I would call them eclectic tastes. I'm like a super nerd, and I have a couple games that I've just played for decades. Like, they're just my games. Like, I played The Sims 2. My world is currently slightly corrupted, so I need to roll back to an old save. So I haven't played The Sims 2 in about a year and a half, but I'm sure I will play it again because like I'll go through these long periods of like 3 years playing The Sims 2 and then like a year or two off and then like 3 more years. So Sims 2, Minecraft, I play a lot of Minecraft, Dwarf Fortress. I'm currently playing Crusader Kings 3, I think is the new one, because that one was on Game Pass. I'm really into like strategy and simulation. That's sort of like my passion. I don't know, just like, I think it is a very engineering thing of me, because it's like one of those things where you're like, I want to make a microcosm of the world, right? So I'm into those sort of games. I'm also into like modding those games. So like I mod Minecraft, and I did a few mods for The Sims 2, because like there's always something about the game that I'm like, this game is 95% perfect. But the bugs that attack your plants in The Sims 2 are too frequent or not frequent enough, and the way you water them doesn't work perfectly. There's a bug in that. So I'm like, I have to fix it, even though it takes me like 10 hours to fix it. And I hate myself the entire time I'm fixing it, because I'm like, I'm so bored. I just want to play The Sims 2, but I can't because it won't let me because it's not perfect. So yeah, I do play a lot of games, and I also work on my own projects in my free time, which is something that I really like about working at Pipeworks, because a lot of places where you work, they will take ownership of everything you do, including on your off time. So I like working for Pipeworks because they don't do that. That's something that as long as you write down what you're working on and you send it to HR, it's your idea. As long as you don't touch company resources with it, then they'll leave it alone. So I think it allows me to have a really great work-life balance working for Pipeworks in particular. And every company is different with that. So an important thing to note in everyone's futures is if you're interested in doing stuff on your own time, make sure you get a job that's going to allow that.
I heard that from both of you, that work-life balance is real important. So it's good to have a lot of things in your life that inspire you, and also take a break from them sometimes. Cool. Before you ask your question, Abby, I'm going to say we are going to ask your questions, or invite you to ask your questions. So if you have one, we're going to be putting it out to you folks soon. So get it in your mind or text it to me, and we'll come to you afterwards. So Abby, after you.
Absolutely. Which on that note, my heart broke for you a little bit when you talked about a corrupted game, because I've definitely had a couple of corrupted Skyrim saves where the amount of jewels in my house was not adequate to whatever was processing that game at the time. And it's always a tragedy and a half when that happens. But the next question that we kind of have for you both is, we're talking about your fields and what you do. Like, what is the best part of your job? Like, what's the best part of being in your field and doing the work that you do? Like, what's the part that makes you smile when you get home and you're not at work anymore? Anybody want to go first for that one? We'll go Sara.
For me, the best part is very just self-contained. I have the most fun when a character animation really comes together. It's kind of like one or the other, right? Like the worst parts for me about my job is when like I have a character animation that I have to do, and I'm just feeling really uninspired, and it feels like a slog, and it's not coming together, and I know I can do better, but it's just not coming through. But then either when I break through, or just from the get-go, I get an assignment that's just like, it's just really exciting, and I know exactly what I'm going to do with it, and I can do it really well. Those are some real highs. If you have a great team with you and you can like share your animations, and you all get together and like, oh yeah, that was really well done, like congratulations, or oh yeah, like that looks great. Where you can kind of like cheer each other on and like inspire each other. That's really great too. So yeah, I mean, my highs are just when I do good work, it makes me feel pretty good.
What about you, Emily?
I think I was just thinking, and I think that it's when we bring on a new engineer and I get to train them, honestly, like it's so cool when somebody's really cool. And we brought on new people who were less than cool, and that was also like less than cool, right? But when like somebody gets brought on and they just have an awesome attitude and they're just like so willing to do things, and you're like showing them the ropes, and you're like, here's how things work at Pipeworks. I'm gonna be like your mentor, like that really like is probably when I have the most fun and I feel the most like connected and interested in what I'm doing, is when I'm sharing it with somebody else and like bringing somebody else like on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you both had a pretty similar answer, and I think it just goes to show how important it is to appreciate like the people you work with make a big part of your experience doing whatever you do, whether it's working for Pipeworks or even just working in Ophelia's place. If that question was directed towards me, I would basically say the same thing. Like being able to work with people who I appreciate and who make me feel good while I'm like working, and we can celebrate what we're doing together is awesome. It makes a world of difference.
Thinking that's exactly the same answers we had when we were talking about how being a fan and fandoms inspire us too. It's like half of the joy is just meeting someone else who knows what you're talking about, who also gets the like, oh my God, excitement when you're doing it. Oh man, I had a question and it just vacated my brain, like it moved out and put aside open. Well, then that means that it is time for me to look around my screen and see if any of you have a question for either Emily or Sara or both of them that has been, ooh, look, Rory, bless you. I know I can count on you. Rory, do you want to ask it? Do you want to unmute yourself? Maybe turn your camera on and ask your question?
My question is, oh dang it, my brain is blanking. Come on.
Rory, we're on the same page today, dude. I feel you. Do you want a second to think about it? We'll come back to you.
I remember. What was your favorite video game that the two of you have worked on, in your opinion? Which one is your favorite?
Good question. Who can think of it fastest?
So the favorite game that I've worked on, we released this really weird game that's like hardly a game. It runs on Facebook, and it's called Rival Peak, and it's sort of like watching The Sims, which is really but it's very interesting because like you play it by watching it on Facebook, and then like there's a few buttons you can press to interact with the people, and it's just a very different sort of game. So the most fun I had working on this game is just that it wasn't a game, it was something new, like it was a totally different new format, like this streaming thing on Facebook. So there was a lot of innovation around it, and just a lot of hype. Like everyone was really hyped, like nothing like this has ever existed. Facebook gave us a ton of money to make this, but we had to do it incredibly fast. So it was like a really short project, like 6 months, but everybody was just like crazy the whole time. And so like from a team perspective, it was really interesting. And also just from like a resume and me working on something new and different, it was really interesting.
Very cool. Sara?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my favorite project so far is the one that I'm on now. It's been announced enough. What? Yeah, it's a project I'm on now. It's really cool. It deals with some characters that have been like, known and loved for a while now. So being able to work on characters that means a lot to a lot of people is very exciting. I don't know how announced it's been, so I'm not going to say the name.
Better safe
What
than
I'll
sorry.
do is I will put your studio's web address in there, and maybe it'll say on there.
It might say. I can't actually remember. So I'm going to play
Well,
it. But it's a really cool
something
game.
from a past project that you worked on, or even before Pipeworks?
So similarly, actually, up until my current project, my favorite one was actually a game that did not do so well. Apparently, it was kind of a hard game to play. It was a Facebook game, but it was Marvel Avengers Alliance Tactics. It was the second one. The game itself the gameplay was fine, but being able to work on like Spider-Man, being able to work on Loki, like all these really cool characters, that again, same theme, like being able to work on these really big characters and kind of take ownership of them for a little bit. I think that's always very exciting to me.
That's awesome. I think I've heard of that game before somewhere. I think I have.
I think a lot of people might have heard of it. I'm not sure if a lot of people played it.
Fair enough.
That's how it rolls. Thank you so much, Rory, for asking that question. Junia, you have a question too?
Yeah. Do you have any fandoms that you think should be adapted into a video game? And if you had the opportunity to, how would you do it?
Good question.
Wow.
That's a thinker. I'd say whoever thinks of the answer first. Yeah, go for it.
I'm all up on the internet now. I have like all my social media accounts where I post my art. Putting my art online originally started because I was a part of a fandom back when I was in like middle school, and the internet was not new, but not as established as it is today. And it wasn't quite so centralized as it is today. I found a fandom in the X-Men Evolution universe. That was my thing. I was very big on that. I had ships, I had OTPs. Honestly, I would love to make like, I don't know, just like not a dating sim, but like a school, kind of like, I guess like The Sims, but with like X-Men characters where you could like role play like teenage X-Men characters. That would be so fun for me. I would love that. I would turn X-Men Evolution into like a Sims game.
I would play that game.
I would too.
Undoubtedly.
Wow. I want to give you all the money in the world just to make that happen.
I would need to convince an engineer, probably Emily.
Oh, hey. How convenient. Emily, what about you? Were you able to think of one?
I think my first fandom was Avatar: Last Airbender. Like, I watched that in college. Like, it was very like formative for me. It was like, yeah, my first fandom, like I got on the forums and stuff, and that was really cool. Like the first time talking to strangers on the forums and like writing fan fiction and things like that. I just love that world so much, and I really loved how Korra took that world and like evolved it so that the world felt really like lived in, you know, like it seems like it's not very often where you have a franchise that actually wants to evolve their world and make their world like dynamic. You know, I always think of the Elder Scrolls as like the exact opposite of that, where it's like the world is just stuck. The world is like thousands of years old and it's always been this way. I think even the canon story of Elder Scrolls is that like the gods didn't want to destroy this world, and so it's just kind of like left hanging by a thread. And so that's sort of like a very static world. You know, you're in ruins and they like, you pick up a sword and you're like, this is the exact same sword that this guy forged over there, you know? And so like it feels very static, but the thing I loved about Avatar was how dynamic the world is and felt and stuff. So I would love to work on a game like in that world, like an MMO or something. Like that would be amazing for me.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Fantastic question. Sorry, say that again. I talked over top of you.
Sorry, no, it's I would play both of those.
Absolutely.
Hard same. Absolutely.
So
Ira,
I know that Ira has one.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel.
I was curious. How does it work for when you're making Easter eggs in the game, and who mostly makes them, like the programmers or the artists?
A good question.
It really depends on the kind of Easter eggs. Let's see. In the games that I've worked on, a lot of the Easter eggs were made by the artists, where it wasn't like a secret item that you find. Those tend to, in my experience, those tend to be done by like the designers and the engineers, less so with the artists. But we have like snuck like our own pets into games. So Easter eggs that were very like self-satisfactory, like very fun for us, maybe not for anyone else. But we've like like items that players can buy. We've like named them after ourselves. There's like I've worked on a fashion game where the first set of glasses that you could buy for your character were called the Sara glasses. So yeah, we do a lot of Easter eggs like that, but they tend to be Easter eggs like for our entertainment and less so for like the players. I think those tend to require a little bit of like code and engineering help, so art tends to be a little less involved in those, I think.
So are they done like on a whim for the people making the game, or some of the bigger ones planned?
I haven't actually worked on like a really, really big game. So I don't know how it works for those, but 100% of the times for me, it was completely on a whim that someone just did it without asking. Yeah, whoever has the power to do it, they just will.
Awesome. That's awesome. What about you, Emily? Do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think I agree with Sara here. The Easter eggs I've seen have all been art Easter eggs, because I think those are like the easiest ones for like an artist to just sneak in. The problem with adding an Easter egg from a programming perspective is like every time you code something, there's a little bit of risk involved in breaking something else. So like the engineers have to be very disciplined. Like sometimes like you can actually get a little bit in trouble if you go and implement a feature like that you weren't supposed to. Like you get too passionate and you're like implementing stuff, and like sometimes it works out well, but then sometimes people are like, why did you do that? You caused like 10 bugs in other parts of the code, you know? So like you actually have to be really careful about what you do as an engineer, and like you have to be very respectful of the code base. But at the same time, like I think that somebody who is in a position could sneak something in, but also like engineers aren't artists. So like, it's really hard for us to make something on our own. You know what I mean? Because like, what would our Easter egg look like? We're engineers. We can't make art. If we do make art, it's called, it's like engineer art, where it's like super placeholder, like pixel art. So our work is not polished enough to get in as Easter eggs usually. So I imagine if there was a larger Easter egg, it would actually have to be planned by design, and then it would have to be like implemented by engineering.
Yeah, so I think it actually depends on what you define or what kind of Easter egg you're talking about. Some Easter eggs that are kind of like Easter eggs that are specifically designed for players to find, that are, you know, not a part of the main game, but just kind of like a little goodie that, you know, people who are really passionate can find, like can seek out. I think those are actually, they tend to be features that are designed and made by engineers, and, you know, like art is done by artists. So it's a feature specifically designed to be found and not part of the main game. I have been a part of a lot of like art Easter eggs where it's not really anything for the player. It's just something random that the artist went, you know, like went renegade and just did on our own kind of thing.
Like a Pipeworks logo. It just gets stuck somewhere. I remember one of our logos ended up on like a shirt once, and it was like not really meant to be our logo, but like it clearly was.
Yeah, stuff like that.
I love it. That's fantastic. Do we have other, thank you very much for your question, Ira. Do we have other questions from folks? I'm looking. Ooh, this just means that you did a really good job of telling your story about video
Questions
games.
are always hard to come up with.
They are. I know that I actually, I have a Minecrafter in my house. I like Minecraft myself. And Emily, I know you mentioned doing mods and things like that, and that's something you like to do, but how do Minecraft mods work? Like, how do you even get started doing something like that? If you decide, I want to do the Minecraft mods, where do you begin?
There's a couple different ways to do mods in Minecraft. If you're on Java Minecraft, the best way to do mods is to use Forge. So you can Google like Minecraft Forge, and there's an SDK you can download. Probably the best way to get started would be to like Google like a video on Minecraft Forge and look for something that's relatively recent. If you're going to do Minecraft modding, I think probably the most important thing you need to do is find a recent tutorial, because Minecraft is always being updated. So there's a lot of like good tutorials, but they're like really old for like really old versions of Minecraft. And for me, that's just like a bummer. Like I don't want to learn how to like how to mod Minecraft from like 5 years ago. I want to like learn how to do it now with like the current features, right? Because I can't go back to before there was horses in Minecraft. Like that's no. So just probably Googling and watching some tutorials, like just watch a tutorial how to make your own custom block, because like it's actually not that hard. And I'm not an artist, but I can open like a, Paint and make some coloration and make my own block in Minecraft. Actually, I have a grass block. So like I'm into building like really like ancient sort of prehistoric villages in Minecraft. So I just like made a grass block because it bothered me that they have like hay, but they don't have like thatch. So I was like, I need thatch. So like that's one of the things I've just added literally for myself, and so I can have another block to make like good looking roofs in Minecraft. And that's actually pretty easy to do. So Minecraft Forge and Google some good YouTube videos.
That's awesome. I've got Trogdor the Burninator and Thatch Roof Cottages now stuck in my head for my fellow olds.
I'm gonna have to Google the difference between hay and thatch.
I know.
That's
when
This is just a Minecraft thing though, because hay in Minecraft is made of wheat, which doesn't really make sense either. Because like wheat and straw are different things, but Minecraft doesn't differentiate the difference between wheat and straw. And those
that sounds like a delicious house. I don't know.
I just wanted more blocks, okay? That's the whole point of Minecraft. You just want more blocks. And now, actually, I'm having a hard time playing Minecraft because I'm starting to get that thought in my mind, the thought that it's not perfect. And so, like, pretty soon, I'm going to have to make a slab version of my thatch because it's starting to bother me that I don't have slabs of thatch. I only have full blocks of thatch. And, like, pretty soon, it's going to overwhelm me. And then I will have to hate myself for, like, 10 hours where it's not even going to take me 10 hours, but it will take me a couple hours where I test and like make this half slab. And I'm like, I hate making half slabs. I hate doing this. Why is Minecraft doing this to me?
I mean, I feel that deeply where you're like, this will be mine. You will bow to my will.
One way or another. It's unfortunately getting close to the time where we do have to start wrapping up. That was probably the fastest hour of my entire life. I don't know about you all, but I do have one final question to kind of like put a pin in it, and then a couple of announcements for the audience that I need to go over. But my last question for you two is, well, I guess it's kind of a two-parter, but what is kind of the major takeaway that you would hope that people watching this and listening to this, or what do you want them to take away from this? Like what is the gift of knowledge you would want them to leave with if you could pick one?
Your advice, your inspiration.
What do you think, Emily? Do you got one?
Yeah, I would like to say that like making video games, there's so many different places for so many different people. Like I mentioned at the beginning, like there's designers and artists and producers and engineers and QA. There's just so many different places for people to fit in. And there's so much opportunity. So if it's something that you're interested in, there's like really no harm in applying. There's no harm in finding out, And so like, I guess I just want to inspire people to like follow what they're passionate about and to like try things, and don't write off video games, because I know that there's kind of a bad reputation that working in video games is like hard and like very competitive and not fun and bad work-life balance. But that really depends on where you work. It's kind of like finding a good job is like dating or something, like you just have to find the right one for you. So like, you can't just be like, oh, all video game jobs are going to be terrible, right? Like you have to be like, no, there's, like there's different companies and there's different places. And like, maybe you're less technical and you're an artist, or maybe you're not an artist and you're not technical, but you just like are really good at planning. And then you can be a producer. And that's like, you could make a big difference in games in lots of different ways.
Good answer. Thank you. What about you, Sarah?
I want to be in video games now.
I guess for me, it really is about the importance of finding your community. I know you guys have touched a couple times on the whole fandom thing. Like my fandom was my community for like my entire high school and, part of my college life. That's whether your community is a fandom or your friends or, the people you work with, that really does make it or break it for me. People like to ask me what my favorite game to work on was, or if I worked on anything that they would know if I've worked on anything really cool. And my answer usually is like, sure, there are always games that I find like really cool to work on, or I have like my favorite of the bunch. But it's really not about it's not really the title that I'm doing. It's always the people that I work with that really changes my experience. So the games that I have the most fun working on are the ones that I feel the most supported, that I work with a really good team, and, that I felt like I work very effectively with. So yeah, finding your community has been very important every stage of my life, whether it was, as a kid or as a college student or as a professional. And I hope you learn, or I hope you experience that as well.
Wonderful. That's such a great place to end it, because, we are called a community for girls, and finding your community and finding your people who really appreciate you and what you do is like what we're all about. So Sara and Emily, we cannot thank you enough for taking this time, for being with us today. Like I said, you're both busy people, and we appreciate everything that you have shared with us. Glimmer hands or applause or thank yous for everybody here, from everybody here.